Welcome to Top Notch Online TV, a paragon of excellence. With you today is Teacher Risper, a teacher of English and Literature from PCA Kikuyu High School, an examiner as well as an author. We are still continuing to demystify An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro, and we are moving on with the plot analysis of the text. The text has been broken down into episodes that are marked by time. We've done already 2 episodes as well as the introduction of the book. If you've missed out on an episode, you can catch up on them. They're all found on YouTube. Today we are going to look at episode 3 that is running from November 1949. All this we are still insisting we are within the era of the American occupation of Japan. The Americans are calling the shots. They're now the ones in charge after the Japanese surrender after the World War II. Now, as this episode unfolds, we are looking at a flashback that Ono had, a flashback on when he first got acquainted to Dr. Saito. Ono as a person, he has been that person who wants his word to be the one that has the final say. His daughter had disputed the fact that Dr. Saito did not know of Ono until they were having the marriage negotiations between their two families. However, Ono is of a different opinion that they had known each other, just that they had not interacted at such a close level. His flashback goes back to when he was moving into the new house, the one that had previously been occupied by Akira Sugumira's family. As he was erecting a signpost indicating his name, the name of the family that they'll be occupying that new house, is when he ran into Mr. Saito. According to Ono, Mr. Saito had welcomed him into the neighborhood and stressed on the fact that he was very proud to have an artist of his caliber living in their street among his neighbors. That is an Ono's account of when he and Dr. Saito first got acquainted. We are also seeing that there is an intended meeting between Ono, his 2 daughters, and the grandson. We are learning that at that particular moment, Noriko's marriage finally sailed through after the father came clean about his past involvement. There was no longer anything holding back the 2 families getting married. Therefore, Noriko has already got married and she's now living with Saito's son, Taro. The people who have come for that visit are Setsuko and her son, Ichiro. Another thing we are seeing from this particular episode, we are looking at a flashback on when Ono worked under Mori-san. You can remember Mori-san was the second teacher that Ono had. After he left Takeda's where he used to paint mass paintings to sell to the tourists, he was invited by Mori-san to paint in his villa. Now he is reminiscing over the days he used to work at Mori-san's villa. And what much can we learn from that? We are looking at Mori-san had a style of painting, and he wanted his students to also adopt that particular kind of painting. A case in quotes is someone who was he was considered the best of Mori-san's student, a person by the name of Sasaki. Sasaki had been highly upheld, and this thing keeps reoccurring, that a teacher has a student that is favorite, but when the student decides to forge their own path away from the teacher's path, there is a fallout. Yet another one is about to happen. We are looking at someone called Sasaki. Sasaki, a protege of Mori-san. But then he started to paint in his own style, and later on he was turned away from the villa. We are looking at that particular episode because it has been dwelt on in some kind of a way. Sasaki was turned away, and after he had fallen out with their teacher Mori-san, he had gone back to the villa, and he's even asking his own friends, the ones who used to be close to him, could you please tell me, where has my confiscated painting, where has it been kept? But no one is willing to speak to Sasaki in unison with their teacher. They're trying to show some kind of solidarity with their teacher. And then we are being told in that villa, Sasaki now became to be known as a traitor. Whenever you're no longer walking the path of the teacher, you now become a traitor. So in that villa, whenever someone could compare you, people used to make fun of each other and they would laugh. But whenever someone would make fun of you and compare you to Sasaki, it would even result to fist fight. People would take it outside and square it out. You cannot be comparing me to a traitor. And having said this, these are now memories of Ono as he was working under Mori-san. Also, it happened that I had mentioned someone by the name of Matsuda. Matsuda had now finally come for, there's a day he had come for Ono. And he wanted to recruit Ono into painting propagandist kind of paintings. Ono at first had been resistant, but later on, they took a walk with Mori-san. At first, Ono had been resistant. Later on, he had taken a walk with Matsuda and they had visited a certain slum, a certain shanty, and they had witnessed some boys who were trying to torture some kind of animal. And the look on those boys' faces is what captured the attention of Ono and marked something that he put into his next painting, a painting by the name of Complacency. After that, you're seeing that Ono had been naive. He had been thinking what Matsuda wants to recruit him to do is to help fight poverty within his country of Japan through the arts. But then Matsuda had made it very clear. They wanted now to grow greater, and for them for Japan to grow and go into greater heights, they needed to have that kind of pushing. And that is how he began to paint their propagandist kind of paintings. We are looking at now the complacency kind of portrait had a symbolism of the readiness to rise up and fight. And you're looking at during those days that the nationalism was going on in Japan. That kind of his painting, the paint of Ono, the one named Complacency, was held in high esteem. We later see that Ono decided to take that route of painting. And he was doing that. He was taking a lot of time doing his painting in secret. But then a friend, you hang around mostly, a friend will always know when something is amiss. Among his friends, the ones he had poached from Takeda's farm was someone by the name Tortoise. I've already mentioned Tortoise in an earlier episode. Now Tortoise was asking him, what are you working on this time? There's a lot of secrecy surrounding your work. And trusting that this is a friend, he had decided to show him a part of the painting. But Tortoise had been very shocked. Why are you going against the teaching of Mori-san? This is not the kind of painting that Mori-san would be advising you to paint. Do you remember what happened to Sasaki? Sasaki was the guy who was considered a traitor, and it was very bad. It was very odd for you to be compared to such a person. Later on, we are learning that Mori-san got wind of the fact that his student, one he had held in high regard, who is Ono, was now doing paintings that were away from the style of the teacher. He had cornered Ono one of the days, and he had asked Ono, why are you no longer having paintings that capture the floating world? The floating world, as you had earlier said, was the period where people were having fun, making merry, the nightlife that you can call it. People are drinking, they are having fun in clubs. Those were the kind of paintings they were being encouraged to paint. But then now this one is paintings that are full of aggression. And Tortoise had already warned him, the teacher will not be happy about it. Then the teacher has got wind of it, that one among the students, who is Ono, is painting something contrary. The teacher thinks it is an opportunity to square it out to put the student back to the right path. Take the student back to the right path. Now, Mori-san is warning his student Ono, I want you to stop with such kinds of painting. And if there's any other painting you're withholding from me, I want you to bring it to me. And if you can remember when you were beginning on episode 1, this scenario is very reminiscent of something that happened to Ono even in his earlier life. You remember his father telling him, bring me any painting that you might still be holding, and he was not willing to surrender the painting. Over here, he also did the same thing. He told Mori-san he was not willing to surrender the painting, and he was hoping that as a teacher, The teacher would be supporting his growth into finding his own wings. He needed to go his own way, and he was hoping for the teacher's support. But then the teacher tells him, it is either you surrender the paintings. If the paintings are not forthcoming, then you have no option but to quit the villa. And the teacher goes ahead and tells him, wishes him well. He tells him, Ono, you are among one of my very promising students. Therefore, I'm sure you'll find your way in life. And that is how Ono left Mori-san's establishment. We're also seeing a mention of someone else. You know, the story takes a back and a forth. You remember, as the story is beginning, we are looking at Ono, and Ono is being visited by Ono. In fact, this time Ono is paying a visit to Noriko and her new husband Taro. And also invited with them is Setsuko, the elder sister of Noriko, as well as her son Ichiro. As they are conversing with the young man who has really grown, he's now a boy of 7 years, according to the grandfather. When he interviewed the boy, when he questioned the boy was able to tell him, I'm now 7, I believe. The grandfather even goes ahead and tells him, you can now have sake. Sake is some kind of alcoholic drink. You are old enough to have sake at this particular age. And he promises the grandson, today at the table, as you're having dinner, we shall serve you a bit of it. Your uncle, the late Kenji, when he was having his first sip of the alcoholic drink, he was about your age. That is a promise from the grandfather. Now we are seeing there's some kind of an easy relationship, some kind of relationship that is warm between the grandfather and the son. And at this moment, the grandson takes the opportunity to ask the grandfather, why is it that you're being compared to Naguchi? Naguchi is a composer of songs that are having a similar effect on the people of Japan. They are whipping up their emotions. They're making these people to go ahead and fight they're making people to go ahead and fight, trying to conquer new territories. But what is different between them is Ono is a painter. His paintings are the ones that have that effect. On the other side, Naguchi, he is a composer of songs. Therefore, his songs are the ones that are having such an effect. And this boy had overheard. The family, when they're out of the grandfather's earshot, they were comparing Ono with Naguchi. Naguchi, a person who had recently taken his own life. The same thing you're calling harakiri, honorable suicide. Naguchi had felt responsible that his songs had heightened the emotions of the people, and the young men felt the need to go to war. And as a means of apology, just like the head of Miyake's company, he had felt the need to take his own life. Now the young man cannot fill in the blanks. What is it about my grandfather that is being compared to Naguchi? Therefore, goes ahead and involuntarily offers the information to their grandfather. Another thing we're learning from this episode is we are learning about Kuroda's arrest before the start of the war. Let me take you back to Kuroda. The time I've mentioned Kuroda, I've mentioned him twice. First of all, he meets Ono and he doesn't bow in respect to Ono. Another time is Ono visits his house and a student of his turns away Ono, accusing him of the end that had become of Kuroda. It was as a doing of Ono. It was the work of Ono that caused a lot of problems for Kuroda. Now in this particular episode 3, we are learning exactly what did Ono do that made Kuroda very bitter, and he doesn't even want to re-establish any links with Ono. We are learning that through a flashback, we are seeing Kuroda getting arrested, and Ono arrives at his house and he finds some people in plain clothes and others in uniform. These are the authorities. The authorities have come to arrest Kuroda. But then what is Kuroda being accused of? He is being accused of unpatriotic activities. And we are learning that the unpatriotic activities he is being accused of were acquired on information given by Ono. This can be found on page 210. It is Ono who informed on Kuroda that this guy is not having he is doing unpatriotic activities. Now someone would wonder, what are these unpatriotic activities? Unpatriotic activities during those days were the people who are not supporting Japan's invasion of other countries. He is still painting about the floating world. People are painting about aggression, nationalism. Now he's looking like he doesn't want to move with the flow. Later on, Kuroda is arrested, and Ono arrives as they have already taken away Kuroda, but then the mother of Kuroda is found there and she is crying. Ono, I think it is some kind of guilty conscience. He's asking the policeman why are you also questioning Kuroda's mother? What does she have to do with this? And the policeman's reply is that we are rounding up his associates as well. Anyone associated with Kuroda will also be sailing in the same boat. We are also arresting them. And if you know what is good for you, you'd rather leave. That is when Ono goes ahead and he introduces himself. He says, you are coming here today. The information was acquired from my informing. Now we are learning that what is causing the estrangement between him and Kuroda is that he informed on Kuroda and Kuroda was arrested. Kuroda suffered while he was in detention. That is why the bitterness. And he swears that his intention had been to advise that Kuroda be spoken to. He had not intended that it will go that far, to an extent that Kuroda will be arrested and he'd also be jailed. That is a guilty conscience of Ono that is speaking. We are finally seeing, as this episode is coming to an end, we are seeing that Ono had dinner with his newlywed daughter, her husband Taro, and Setsuko, and also Ichiro. Then Ichiro is questioning why the grandfather will not be sleeping over for the night, but the grandfather goes ahead and confides in him that their establishment is small. It is a small house. It is consisting of only 2 rooms. Therefore, the grandfather will have to go back and sleep in his own house. And he promises the grandson that the next day he will come to see him off at the train station as the grandson is leaving. We are finally going into the 4th episode. We are moving within time. We are no longer in 1949. We are now moving to episode 4, that is June 1950, but we're still dealing with plot analysis. In the plot analysis of 1950, the major event that has taken place, we are looking at the death of Matsuda. Matsuda, who had been a very close associate and almost an age mate of Ono. Ono has just received the previous day news about the death of Matsuda. Matsuda has died a lonely death. He had not had many visitors, not after Ono had visited him some 18 months earlier. But since then, he has not had many visitors. We are also learning another thing, that both of Ono's daughters are expectant and they're about to deliver within the same year. So we are seeing that Noriko's marriage turned out to be successful. And about Setsuko, she is adding to her family. She already has Ichiro. She's also expectant. She's about to deliver the month after. Therefore, we are seeing expansion of family. We're also seeing that Ono had taken up painting once more. As the play was beginning, he had stashed away his paintings because these paintings were a mark of his guilty conscience. The paintings had something to do with Japan going into war. But now later on, after he admitted his guilt, the truth always sets you free, he has now embraced his hobby once more. He has taken back to painting, much to Matsuda's delight. Matsuda is praising him. I'm so happy. Before Matsuda died, he's now recalling their last encounter. Matsuda had been very happy that this man had taken into painting once more. Another thing we are going to look at is effects of the war, psychological. As much as most of the effects of the war might be physical, we are talking about buildings falling, we are talking about people dying. We're also looking at something else that is presented in this particular episode. We are looking at the psychological effect of war. The last time, where the episode starts, Matsuda has already died, but you can't help but recall the last encounter he had with Ono. What are some of the things that were brought to our attention? Matsuda, Ono, we are being told Matsuda that every time he feels the smell of fire, the smell of burning, it reminds him of some negative fact. It is disturbing him. The smell of burning reminds him of bombings and fire. Now we are learning that during the World War II, during the wars that had taken place, among the effects, people are still having a psychological impact because of the war. Imagine someone, whenever they smell burning, what they can remember is bombing and fire. That is what Ono confides about the effect. He confides it to Matsuda. We're also seeing something about a juxtapose. Two characters are being juxtaposed. We are looking at Ono's description of Matsuda finally. He's talking about Matsuda and he said his final memory of Matsuda is that this guy, you look at his face, it is marked with a lot of disillusionment. Disillusionment can be defined as disappointment. Something you had seen the good of, but later on, you're disappointed because it turns out to be not as you had perceived it. Now, Matsuda, his view of the happenings, it is marked with a lot of disillusionment. When they were doing it, he looks at it, they were looking at a greater good. They were thinking that something good will come out of their activities, but it did not happen. Therefore, even as he's dying, what Ono can tell about him, he's a disillusioned man. On the other side, now if you are to juxtapose, to contrast on the other side of Ono accepts his responsibility in it, responsibility in the actions. According to Ono, when he was doing this, he was doing it for the greater good of Japan, and he feels that it was something that was worthwhile back then. Therefore, he is still proud of his involvement. He's proud of what he did. He doesn't have to hide it. That is why he took the responsibility for it. And as the story is coming to a close, we are looking at the issue of change. Change has taken place. Among the things that are happening is the establishment that used to be Mrs. Kawakami's is no longer in place, meaning that the advice that Ono had given Mrs. Kawakami to sell and shift happened. Mrs. Kawakami's establishment is no longer in place. It has been replaced with modern buildings which is an example of change. And outside, there's a bench. It is not really a public bench as what Ono tells us, but Ono has always sat on that bench because according to him, the place has been built where it initially used to be the Migihidari. And the Migihidari, they used to have a special table at the Migihidari. Now when he sits on that particular bench, he feels like he can relive the days of the Migihidari. And the novel ends with Ono wishing well for the young generation as they endeavor to rebuild Japan. And in himself, he no longer feels guilty, but he feels some kind of gladness. This brings to an end the plot summary of An Artist of the Floating World, hoping that you've been able to have an insight and understanding of the book. The next time we are meeting, we are going to look at character and characterization as well as the themes. The themes are some kind of reinforcement on what you have already discussed in the plot. If maybe something you missed out on the plot, let's catch up as your next meeting on discussion of the themes and character and characterization. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us.